But you also like green bean casserole. Blah.
That was Danielle, but I do like it. She
Okay.
loves it. Mine was stuffing and apple pie. Those are.
Oh, okay. Well, yours are good then. Okay.
But Danielle likes green bean. I do like green bean casserole. I just didn't say I loved it like she did.
Yeah.
Whoa, calm down.
Well, we were just talking about how she was eating
Green beans. I'm eating cold sweet potatoes.
Oh, I love green bean casserole.
That's not
Françoise, I'm at City Hall, by the way, and the Christmas tree is up.
Yeah, it was up last night.
No, it wasn't up last night.
1 o'clock.
Yeah, it was.
I'm gonna call
the big one?
first,
Yeah.
The big one.
We're done talking about the Christmas tree, so we can go. Okay.
Okay.
On the meeting to order. First up, approval of minutes. Any issues with the minutes?
No.
No. Okay. Consent item. Would either of you like to see the sales tax chart?
Question on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
The inflation part, I don't have it in front of me, but why is it so high in 22 year over year versus 23? It seems low because inflation is crazy right now. So am I reading that wrong?
Is there somebody from staff? I can take a stab at it but yeah, there you go.
This is Bill Levine. I'm a budget analyst with the finance department. So inflation this year has been running for most of the year, well, most of the recent months, between 3% and 5%. So that's comparing year over year. So comparing, I'll give you the most recent, October was 3.2%. So this October prices were 3.2% higher than October 2022. And that is what I'm giving you is called the CPI-U, or price index for urban consumers. That's the U part of it. So that's a national figure. I will say maybe two things. Inflation in Denver specifically is running more like 5% right now. So it is running higher than what I'm reporting here, which is the national CPI-U.
Okay.
They only do the CPI-U every other month. That's partly why I don't use it, but it's certainly very relevant to know that prices in Metro Denver are higher than they are nationally. And I think the other thing, prices went up the most in 2022. And I know, speaking as a pained consumer, I think when we think about prices, for example, at the grocery store, maybe two things just to mention. When we think about what prices were 2 years ago, you really can take 2 years worth of inflation. And so it's the 3 to 5% if I'm using national numbers, plus the 8 or so percent that we experienced in 2022. So you combine that, and prices are across the board something like 13% higher for all goods. And there are certain, within the CPI, there are inflations for specific components. There are actually, I think, hundreds of them. So there's new cars, there's groceries, and even within groceries we break it out. But groceries is one of the areas where inflation, even now, even while inflation is sort of on the way down, has been higher than the CPI number itself. So that's certainly, there's certain pockets of areas where we're going to feel more pain, and that's an example of one of them. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking construction, because whenever I'm on the E470 board, and we always talk about those numbers being pretty high. So differences there.
Yeah, been very possible.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into general business item 4A.
And that's our performance management.
Yep.
Doreen, are you the presenter?
Yes, I am.
And you can share your screen if you'd like.
Great, thank you. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Doreen Falcon. I am the Performance Management Program Administrator. And so I'm just going to provide a bit of an overview of our current performance management program. And then once I'm done with that, you're definitely, I'll open it up and you can have, ask any questions that you might have as well. Okay, so earlier this year, we did roll out a new performance management program. The idea behind the new program was really it was intended to kind of move away from just using performance reviews to manage performance, and really to build a more all-encompassing program that can really support employees and supervisors as a whole. And so here you'll see we have 6 different components of our program. And so I'll kind of go through each one with you today. So for position purpose, the idea behind the position purpose component is that we're really trying to align employees' individual positions with department goals, city management goals, and how that continues to kind of work its way up to the city council goals. And so the idea behind the position purpose is really to identify how that position is aligning with all those bigger goals, and what's defining for that position. So hopefully creating some very meaningful purpose for the employee to understand how they really are having an impact in this bigger organization. Then we have expectations and accountability. And so the idea is kind of taking that position purpose and kind of feeding that into the expectations and accountability. So helping employees to define what success looks like, helping them understand what does need to be developed, and helping them really understand how their position, again, what's expected in their position. So that way, by identifying those very clear expectations, we can work towards those goals more successfully. And then you'll see we have communication and relationship. The idea behind that is the just ongoing feedback and communication loop between employees and supervisors. It's intended to be feedback and dialogue, not just the supervisor talking at this employee, but really a two-way dialogue for the two to be able to have that, kind of build that relationship, that trust, so that way they can, really work effectively together. And the idea is really that in that communication piece, that there's regular check-ins, whether that's a one-on-one, whether it's formal or informal, but also a really big component of that is the performance review, which I'll talk about our new performance reviews here in just a moment. But the idea is really to kind of build that relationship between the supervisor and the employee. Next, we have coaching, learning, and development. The idea behind this is really that both the employee and the supervisor take ownership of that coaching, learning, and development component for an employee. So there's the coaching that can happen obviously from a supervisor coaching the employee, but then there's also opportunities for an employee to attend their own attend trainings on their own, or also our mentorship program, and a lot of different avenues where an employee can really take kind of the lead on trying to develop in their career, but then also where the supervisor can really help to support that as well. And so the idea is that both are investing in that development. Then you'll see consultation and resources. That's really where my role comes into play, is that it's the commitment that we have from human resources to really provide more resources to the organization. So, that next little bubble, you'll see corrective action. A lot of times I think that supervisors think the only time they come to HR is if they are wanting to do corrective action or disciplinary action. And we're really changing that dialogue to say, we're here to help you with consultation, different tools, resources, things like that. It could be a situation where you have a really great employee and we really want to help them develop and help them grow and make sure that we keep them engaged. So it could be that kind of consultation where we're looking at what kind of tools we have or options we have available. Or it could look like an employee that's not quite at that corrective action or disciplinary place yet, but maybe we think it's getting there. And so that's what my role is, really here to help and support leaders across the organization and employees with just kind of overall just general performance management. And then last, we have the corrective action and discipline. That's been a component of the city for a long time, but it's still going to exist. But it's another avenue where if we have an employee that we've set those expectations, accountability, we've been checking in, and they're still not where we need them to be, that might be the direction, obviously, that we have to go in. And so we also have that to be able to hold employees accountable now that we have kind of a more formal means of setting some of those expectations and keeping employees accountable. So that kind of moves us into the employee review cycle. And so the employee review cycle that we launched a brand new performance review this year. And so we are actually just now finishing up the last part of that. So I'll just kind of give you a bit of a walkthrough of what that looks like. So from January to February, we have what we call as performance planning. Performance planning is really intended to set those expectations and really define the position. Kind of that first part we were talking about, position purpose, is really occurring during January to February every year. And it's intended to really help communicate exactly what is going to happen for the future year, set goals, things like that. Then we have a mid-year review, which is a formal check-in where the employee will actually get a check-in with using our new performance ratings to learn more about where are they at with their performance and that accountability piece. So that mid-year review happens in June to July, and it's a formal check-in for the employee to also provide feedback. Obviously, our hope is that supervisors are meeting with them throughout the year. However, we do have these very formal check-ins intentionally planned to make sure that we do have that kind of pause in time to have that reflection. And then we do have the year-end review that's happening again November to December. And that's really where it all ties together. We go back and look at that performance planning, look at the mid-year and say, where have we gone? Or where have we, how far have we come? How did you do this year? Again, just kind of a very formal opportunity to discuss how an employee is performing, and also helps us to have documentation, of how an employee is performing. So if we ever have a situation where maybe an employee hasn't been meeting expectations, it's kind of the very beginning of some of that disciplinary or corrective action where we're having those meaningful. A new employee review cycle, it's going through Workday. Everything is housed in Workday, and so that's been definitely something we've been working through, is just getting everybody on that same platform to be able to do those employee reviews through that process. And the great thing about using Workday is we have a lot of data that we can pull from it, whether it's regarding ratings, whether it's regarding timelines of how long they took, or a lot of different variables that Workday allows us that opportunity to really kind of dive deeper into how things are going with the new performance management program. And then last, what I'll just touch base on is that we are shifting culture when it comes to pay for performance. So previously, when we were doing a pass-fail kind of, basically if somebody received at least a meets or an achieves, they received the same exact increase as anybody else in that same position. And we weren't really differentiating those top performers with that increase. And so now we're shifting from that kind of pass-fail to more of a pay for performance. And so employees are kind of incentivized to be performing at a higher level. It does reflect on the pay that they receive in their merit increase. And it gives them that opportunity to really start to kind of shine and be recognized for their contributions. At the same time, it also holds people accountable to where if they are not performing at the level that they need to be, that's going to impact their pay as well. So it's a pretty big shift for the organization, going from kind of this pass-fail to pay for performance. But we are actually just finishing up that last. We're finishing up our first round of this pay for performance just in a few weeks here. So that's kind of where we are currently with our process. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Doreen? Councilmember Bergan?
Thank you. No, I think this is really great. My question is on the merit increase. So previously, average, I don't know, I'm making up numbers, but 3% average, 4%, 5%. So is now the pay for performance, it's the same scale, or have you changed that scale?
That's a great question. So for instance, this year we have a budget of 5%. Each year the table will change based on whatever our budget is likely. And so essentially there's a range of basically no increase whatsoever. So 0 all the way up to 8% is the maximum amount somebody can receive. And it does also correlate with their compa ratio. Sorry, I was trying to think where they're paid at in their range. So let's say they're further into their pay range, they're kind of getting to the top. They're not typically going to be eligible for that 8%, even if they are a really high top performer, because it's trying to kind of help people keep moving through the ranges they need to. And so it's the nice part about it is there are ranges. So let's say if somebody is at meets expectations and they're at a specific compa ratio, the supervisor has some wiggle room to be between 4% and 6%. What's really nice about it is it allows us to be more sustainable that way. So it's not a guaranteed 6, 7, or 8%, but there's some wiggle room to be able to kind of make adjustments based on that.
Okay, and then my second question is, working through that wheel of expectations and the training and the coaching and so forth, and then corrective action. You can take corrective action though anytime. Like, I guess I'm getting at, like, if someone is really not performing, How long is that process?
That's a really great question. And what I can say is that you're right. So it's just kind of how it shows up on that screen, but it can happen at any time. And that's really the idea behind setting those expectations, because if you set the very clear expectations, it should be pretty obvious when someone's not doing what they need to be doing. And so that can take place at any time. Obviously, the first point we would have is to say, how can we help coach this person? How can we get them to where we want them to be? Because we've already done a lot of work to get them here. How do we help them be successful? Then if they're not, obviously, and depending on kind of circumstances and how significant it is, they can move through it fairly quickly, especially if they're like an introductory employee or in a promotional period, where it's pretty evident early on that it's not working out. Whereas maybe if it's somebody that's been here a little bit longer, we wanted to devote a little bit more time depending on circumstances. So it can really vary based on the situation and severity too of the situation. But yes, they can immediately start addressing it as soon as there are any signs of an issue happening.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Doreen. Next up, item 4B, the internal audit plans. I assume this is Michelle. It's going to be presenting on this one. Although I don't see Michelle.
Hi, it's Cherie Van Buren, Senior Internal Auditor. I'll be filling in for Michelle today.
Great.
So we're going to share our presentation. Okay, so I'm going to just briefly go over our 2024 internal audit and police audit plans. We do want to start by affirming our organizational independence. The standards that we follow, the Institute of Internal Audit requires that we do that on a yearly basis. And so we have concluded our risk assessment activities. That included the risk assessment surveys, interviews, and research. Again, this is in accordance with the standards that do require us to develop our plans based on current risk. So we'll start with the internal audit side. The plans that we are proposing are the Aurora Police Narcotics Section Financial Review. The objectives there will be to assess the accuracy of the narcotics financial records and review compliance with procedures for financial records and cash handling. Human resources, compliance review of hiring and separation. The objective there will be to determine if controls are in place to ensure hiring and separation practices comply with federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Citywide expenses, this will include recurring mayor and city council expenses review. The objectives there will be to determine whether recorded expenses comply with city or council policies and determine whether expenses are supported by adequate documentation. Information technology, this will be a follow-up to the engagement we concluded this year. However, the objectives will be determined when the engagement starts. Agreement management for service providers. Objectives determine whether adequate controls exist to monitor service provider agreements and payments, and to determine if the city and service providers comply with agreement requirements. Asset management tracking, determine if adequate procedures exist to track city assets, determine if city assets are properly inventoried and accounted for. Staffing levels and overtime. This engagement will look to answer the following questions. How do staffing shortages impact city services? What internal factors impact the city's ability to fill vacancies? How is the city using overtime to address staffing levels? And what are the financial implications? And how does the city use data to address staffing shortages? For the 2024 police engagements, we are proposing a firearms inventory. Objectives there will be to determine if adequate controls exist to monitor and account for all department issued firearms, and to determine the accuracy of the inventory for firearms. Body worn camera compliance, determine if APD complies with policies and regulations regarding body worn camera use, and determine the extent to which APD utilizes systems in order to monitor body worn camera compliance. Special assignment selection, determine if Aurora Police complies with policies for special assignment selection, and if they have implemented the agreed upon recommendations from the consent decree. And investigation caseload management, determine if Aurora Police policies for investigation caseload management follow leading practice, and determine if adequate controls exist in regard to caseload management caseload management activities. And just an update as far as our other current plan and future plan, these two audits on the internal audit side and the police audit side were canceled for 2023. However, for citywide consultation services, we are currently reviewing non-competitive purchases, and we'll be reviewing overall expenses in 2024, as I mentioned. And then for the police audit plan, the training engagement, that was removed as well. However, the department is addressing training with non-sworn personnel, and these are areas that we will continue to observe and monitor and will assess in future risk assessments. And then these are audits that are currently underway, but will move with us into 2024. For internal audit, that is the facilities management engagement and the review of non-competitive purchases. And then for the police plan, that is the property and evidence compliance review. And then as noted in the audit plan and on the next two slides, we did want to highlight some additional risk topic areas that were brought up during the risk assessment. I won't read them here, but these were just areas that we wanted to highlight to management. We will monitor these areas. They will be reassessed in future risk assessments. However, they may or may not be formal audit engagements. And if there are any questions, we would just like to request approval of our 2024 audit plans.
Any questions? Councilmember Bergan?
Thank you. Why is there not a plan for IT? You said something about it being done in the past, or, I mean, I would think that our risk in IT is great with cybersecurity and those type of things, employees that maybe need to be sure that they're not creating a risk for the, within the IT department for the whole organization.
Yeah, sure. So we finished an initial assessment of IT services in 2023. And based on that assessment, we will develop the objectives for the IT engagement plan for 2024. So we do have IT on our audit plan. We just have not developed the objectives yet. But yes, you're right, cybersecurity, that's still a huge consideration, a huge risk. And we've been partnering pretty closely with Scott Newman, as well as the Information Security Office to ensure that we're remaining abreast of any new developments and anything that we may need to look at from an internal audit engagement side.
And then my second question is, water is not in there, nor planning department. We get a lot of questions from developers on the effectiveness of our planning process. I know Laura Perry has a way to measure some of the things that we asked to implement earlier this year. But is there not an audit in either of those areas?
Not currently. However, we do keep some space in our audit year in case that becomes a higher risk or an area that you all or management may be interested in wanting an internal audit. So we do kind of add some buffer room in case, new engagements pop up or new areas pop up. We have that ability to add that into our plan, and we can reorganize and reprioritize our plan engagements to be able to address any higher risk areas as needed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? I have one question on I know it was under the audits that are being done this year, but we'll wrap up next year, the non-competitive purchases. Does that include contractors? I know that and I've talked with Michelle about this, that there are contractors that we've historically used, and so we just continually renew our contract with them to the point where we don't go out to RFP. Do you know if it includes that type of purchase, even though it's not a product, it's a service that we're just contracting for?
That I think I would have to get back to you. I know I have my colleague Liba, who is the engagement lead on that engagement. I don't know if she's able to answer that question at this moment, but we'd be happy to get back with you, council member, and answer that.
And I guess the easier way to say is, does it include services as well as products? Because again, I know that there are some service providers who we renew their contract, every year without going out to bid.
Yeah, so that is actually the audit that I'm working on currently. It's just including any and every purchase that was made under the single source, sole source, and emergency purchase umbrella. So that could include contracts or any of the sort of issues that you were bringing up. It's just anything that was single source and emergency purchases.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess last question is to the committee members, are you good with this audit plan as presented?
Yeah, I did want to add one more. Fire. What about fire? Because we do a lot with police. And both police and fire are under consent decree.
Correct. And so we do have the specific police auditor that will be focused on the police audits. But if there's an area specific within Aurora Fire that would benefit from an internal audit engagement, that's also an area that we kind of have some buffer room to where we can include an engagement if the risk becomes present there.
Well, the risk was ketamine, which we don't do ketamine anymore. So I guess maybe, when our paramedics do have to administer any kind of drug, is that audited? I don't know, maybe Dustin, Councilmember Zvonek, is that maybe something that is being done within the consent decree?
I know that there's requirements to report that type of, anytime you're using sedation for the purpose of restraint. That has to be used. And obviously we had the conversation about the different types of sedatives that can be used for that. I think that, so going back to, the point made earlier by Shireen about potentially doing other audits, one of the things I'd suggest, and we can look at it in public safety, for these types of issues. And then I think your point on PED, or with planning through PED, is maybe coming up with, if there are other types of audits that we as council believe should be included, because it does sound like Michelle, Shireen, and their team leave space in their calendar for these extra audits that we think might be necessary. So I think that exploring those others are helpful. And I think having Chief Otten and others, just because I don't know for certain, but I would assume that a lot of the things that the data that we would want to see audited out of the fire department, they probably already have readily available because of the consent decree.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
Any objection with the plan? Or I guess they're not moving it forward, it's just saying good to go. Okay, next up it's 4C, the ACLC resolution. And I think this is the one, Terry, you mentioned as a swap. Somebody else is doing this.
This is Teresa Zvonek, and I'm introducing the resolution appointing directors of Aurora Capital Leasing Corporation, or we say ACLC. ACLC plays a vital role in issuing the certificate of participation that the city uses to finance equipment. As you know, COPs, or certificates of participation, are outside of Tabor, so they do not require voter approval, but they are lease purchase financings. So ACLC is the lessor, so they lease the equipment to the city, and that's their role. in the financings. The board of directors typically consists of the city manager, the deputy city manager supervising finance, and the director of finance. And upon the retirement of Jim Twombly, we had a vacancy, obviously. So this new resolution includes Jason Batchelor as city manager. The other two board members remain the same. They'll be Roberto Venegas and Terry Velasquez. And we are asking this committee to pass this on to study session. And from there, hopefully to regular meeting. Any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this.
No questions? Good with moving it forward to study session? Okay, good to go.
Thank you.
Yep. Final item 4D, the committee recap.
So this is Terry, and within your packet, and let's see if I can put it on the screen here real quick. If that shows up. Can you see?
No.
No? Okay, well, then just let's look in your packet. And so basically, the recap just shows all the various items that you as the committee members have reviewed, completed this year. You've been very busy. As you can see, several different changes have been made and updates presented to the Management and Finance Committee. I always like to remind the Management and Finance Committee that you also serve as the Audit Committee, so you have done a fair share of reviews under that scope of work. So you've completed a lot of tasks, moving items forward to study session and City Council as well, including the first lien sewer revenue bonds in February of 2023. We've updated the debt book as well as our investment policy. And then we've provided updates on IT as well as HR items that have come to this committee. Several Metropolitan District items have been presented, as well as a monthly update on our sales tax. And with that, I'd just like to thank the committee for your time and all your work that you've put into the M&F Management and Finance Committee this year. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Terry, and to the entire team for all of the support you've given us over the past year. I know that I appreciate it, and I'll open up if my colleagues have anything they'd like to add.
Just want to say thank you for everyone that is part of the M&F committee for all the work that you guys have done.
And I echo those sentiments.
Thank you.
Well, final item, I guess, is actually miscellaneous matters for consideration. Anything there? Seeing none, there will be no meeting in December. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.